Universal peace. My ass. So there I was, minding my own business, aboard the UES Defiant. And yes, before you ask, some committee of military geniuses actually thought that name was intimidating, rather than a desperate cry for attention. When the galaxy's most pretentious alliance decided to throw a little peace celebration party, the Galactic Concordat had just declared victory over the Zephyrian Empire, after what they pompously called the War to End All Wars. Original title, really. I'm sure nobody's ever used that one before. The whole affair had lasted roughly 3 standard galactic years, which in Oath time translates to long enough for everyone to get really tired of shooting at each other. Commander Felix O'Brien, that's me in case you were wondering, was currently stationed approximately 4 to 7 light years from the nearest decent burger joint, watching alien diplomats pat themselves on the back. Through a live broadcast, the irony wasn't lost on me that they were celebrating the end of warfight, while I sat in the command chair of humanity's most advanced warship, which they'd apparently forgotten existed. Ignored. So, Lieutenant Davies called from the communication station, his voice carrying that particular blend of confusion and amusement that usually preceded something catastrophically stupid. We're receiving a priority transmission from Concordat High Command. Let me guess, I said, not bothering to look up from the tactical display, showing absolutely nothing happening in our sector. Just void. They want to thank us for our, what do they call it when they pretend we helped? Valuable contribution to galactic stability. Actually, sir, Davies grinned. A wide, knowing smile. They're ordering us to stand down and return to Earth immediately. Apparently, our services are no longer required. We're fired. I blinked once, twice, then I started laughing, because the alternative was probably some form of interstellar incident that would require paperwork, and I hated paperwork. They're dismissing us. I asked, just to make sure I'd heard correctly. The people who've been fighting this war for the better part of a decade are being told to go home because the grown-ups have sorted everything out. The nerve. That appears to be the gist of it, sir. Yes. You see, here's the thing about humans that the rest of the galaxy never quite grasped. We don't do dismissed very well. It's not in our nature. We're the species that looked at fire and thought, I bet I can make this burn hotter. We're the ones who invented warfight as a professional career choice, then got so good at it that we started hiring ourselves out as mercenaries to alien civilizations who'd barely figured out gunpowder. We were the best. The Galactic Concordat had been more than happy to accept our help when the Zephyrian Empire started their little expansion project. Human military contractors were cheap, effective, and had this delightful tendency to solve problems with what our alien allies diplomatically termed creative violence. We'd spent years teaching various species the fine art of combined arms tactics, asymmetric warfight, and the theological significance of superior firepower. Brutal lessons, but now that the Zephyrians had apparently surrendered, news to me considering nobody had bothered to inform the people actually doing the fighting. The Concordat figured they could just wave us off, like we were some kind of interstellar pest control service. Just shoo us away. Davies, I said, settling back into my command chair, with the kind of smile that usually made junior officers nervous. Very nervous. Get me a channel to Admiral Harrison back on Lunar Base. And while you're at it, see if you can raise the other ships in our task force. I have a feeling they're getting similar orders, too. So, if I may ask, Davies said carefully, his voice hesitant, what exactly are you planning? Planning? I laughed. A genuine laugh. Kid, I'm not planning anything, but I've got a sneaking suspicion that this war isn't nearly as over as everyone thinks it is. Not by a long shot. And when it inevitably starts up again, I continued, my smile widening. I want to make sure we're in position to provide the galaxy with a proper demonstration of why you don't dismiss human forces while they are still armed and operational. It's a very bad idea. The art of being ignored. Admiral Harrison's face appeared on the main viewer, looking like someone had just told him that his favorite restaurant had been converted into a tax office. His expression carried that particular blend of bureaucratic frustration and barely contained homicidal rage that senior military officers perfected after years of dealing with politicians. "O'Brien," he said, without preamble, his voice tight, "please tell me you haven't started an interstellar incident in the last hour." "Not yet, sir," I replied cheerfully, my voice light. "But the day is young, and I've always been an optimist." "God damn it, Felix." Harrison rubbed his temples in the universal gesture of command officers everywhere. "I suppose you've received the Concordat's generous suggestion that we pack up our toys and go home." "Right. I have indeed. Very thoughtful of them to let us know our services are no longer required. I'm particularly impressed by their timing, dismissing us right before they hold their victory parade. It's like being fired from a construction job just before the ribbon-cutting ceremony. So rude." "The situation is complex," Harrison said, which in military speak usually meant politically beyond all recognition. The Concordat negotiated a ceasefire with the Zephyrian Empire 3 days ago. Apparently, there was some kind of breakthrough in diplomatic channels. A real miracle. A breakthrough. I repeated slowly. "Sir, with all due respect, the Zephyrians have been expanding aggressively across 17 star systems. Their entire military doctrine is based on the principle that might makes right. And their diplomatic corps consists mainly of people who collect the heads of negotiating partners as trophies. What kind of breakthrough convinces them to suddenly embrace peace and universal brotherhood? Seriously." "The kind," Harrison said grimly, his face a mask of weariness, "where they agree to a temporary cessation of hostilities in exchange for territorial concessions that include most of the systems they've already conquered. A brilliant piece of negotiation, wouldn't you say?" I stayed at the screen for a moment, processing this information slowly. "So, let me get this straight. The Concordat's big victory consists of officially giving the Zephyrians everything they've already taken by force, in exchange for a promise to stop taking more. That's a rather cynical way of putting it. So, I'm a career military officer who spent the last 8 years fighting in a war that apparently ended without anyone bothering to inform the enemy. Cynical doesn't begin to cover my current emotional state. I'm beyond cynical. I'm furious." Harrison sighed, and I could see the weight of command decisions settling on his shoulders like a particularly heavy blanket made of bureaucratic stupidity. "Felix, I need you to understand something. The Concordat isn't just dismissing human forces because they think the war is over. No, they're dismissing us because we've become politically inconvenient. Our casualty rates are too low. Our success rate is too high, and our methods make the other species nervous. Very nervous." I said, the pieces clicking into place. A sudden clarity. "We're making them look bad. Weiss, we're making them look incompetent. When human tactical advisors can turn a species' entire military around in 6 months, it raises uncomfortable questions about how they've been fighting wars for the last few centuries. It exposes them. This was unfortunately not a new problem. Humans had a disturbing tendency to revolutionize whatever field we entered, usually by applying what we considered common sense, and everyone else considered revolutionary thinking. We'd accidentally reinvented 3 different species' understanding of physics, improved their agricultural yields by several 100%, and generally made ourselves indispensable in all the wrong ways. So I said, my voice quiet, dangerous. What are our orders? Officially, pack up and go home. Take our ships, our weapons, our tactical innovations, and our inconveniently effective military doctrine back to Earth, where we can't embarrass anyone or expose their flaws. And unofficially, Harrison's smile was the kind that usually preceded career-defining decisions that would either result in commendations or court-martials, with very little middle ground. Unofficially, Commander O'Brien, I'm ordering you to conduct extended patrol operations in the Outer Rim territories, standard reconnaissance protocols, maintaining communication silence, except for scheduled check-ins. Your mission parameters are deliberately vague, which should give you considerable operational flexibility. Translation: go find trouble, and when you do, make sure you're in position to remind everyone why dismissing human military forces might not have been the smartest decision the Concordat ever made. Understood, sir, I said, a wide grin spreading across my face. And if we happen to encounter Zephyrian forces who didn't get the memo about this ceasefire, then you're authorized to defend yourself with appropriate force. And Felix, our definition of appropriate has always been somewhat more generous than most species. Much more generous. You know that. Redefining appropriate force. The UES Defiant wasn't the largest ship in the human fleet. No, but she was definitely the meanest. While other species built their warships to look impressive, all sweeping curves and aesthetic flourishes that served no practical purpose, we designed ours with the single-minded focus of a species that had spent most of its evolutionary history trying to kill things more efficiently. Brutally, she was a block of tungsten steel alloy, wrapped around the most advanced weapon systems human engineering could produce, with enough armor to shrug off a tactical nuclear strike, and enough firepower to sterilize a small moon. The aliens called our ship designs aggressively utilitarian, which we took as a compliment, a badge of honor. Currently, that aggressive utilitarianism was cruising through the Kepler 442 system at a leisurely pace, conducting what the official logs would show as routine patrol operations, and what any reasonable observer would recognize as looking for someone to fight. Eagerly, Lieutenant Commander Wright, my executive officer, was a woman who'd earned her position by being simultaneously brilliant, completely unflappable, and just cynical enough to appreciate the absurdity of our current situation. She was currently reviewing intelligence reports, with the kind of expression usually reserved for people trying to solve calculus problems, while being attacked by wasps. A quiet intensity. "Sir," she said, not looking up from her datapad, her voice flat. "I'm reading some interesting traffic intercepts from the Zephyrian communication networks. Very interesting." "Define interesting," I said, though I was already pretty sure I knew what she was going to tell me. My gut just knew. Well, it seems that roughly 60% of their fleet commanders haven't received any orders about a ceasefire. In fact, based on these intercepts, most of them are still operating under their original expansion directives. Quite shocking. Shocking, I said, with all the surprise of someone who'd just discovered that water was wet, or fire burns. It's almost as if a militant empire built on conquest and territorial expansion might have some communication issues when it comes to suddenly embracing peaceful coexistence. What a concept. It gets better, Wright continued, with the kind of grim satisfaction that came from being proven right about something terrible. Intelligence indicates that at least 3 Zephyrian battle groups are currently moving toward Concordat systems that was supposedly guaranteed protection under the ceasefire agreement. So much for peace. and I suppose the Concordat is handling this development with a usual level of decisive action and clear thinking. I asked, my voice dripping with sarcasm. They're calling it a minor administrative oversight, and requesting that the Zephyrian High Command issue clarifying orders to their field commanders. So naive, it's ridiculous. I stared at her for a moment, trying to process the sheer bureaucratic optimism required to believe that a species, whose idea of diplomacy involved the phrase submit or be annihilated, would suddenly develop an interest in proper administrative procedures. Right, I said finally, my voice tired. Remind me why we're not running the galaxy yet. Because we're apparently too competent to be trusted with the responsibility, sir. That's the official word. Right. Well, in that case, let's see what this minor administrative oversight looks like. Up close, set course for the Proxima Centauri system. If my memory serves, that's where Zephyrian Battle Group Sigma was last reported. And it's also home to about 3 million Concordat civilians, who are probably operating under the charming assumption that they are no longer in a war zone. Poor souls. Sir, said Davies, from his communication station, his voice hesitant. Aren't we supposed to be maintaining communication silence? Davies, my boy, I said, settling into my command chair, with the satisfaction of someone who just found a perfectly legitimate excuse to do something monumentally stupid. We're conducting extended reconnaissance operations. How are we supposed to reconnaissance anything if we're not in position to observe potential threats to Concordat security? And if we encounter hostile forces, then we'll defend ourselves with appropriate force, exactly as ordered. The fact that our definition of appropriate might differ somewhat from the Concordats is really more of a cultural misunderstanding than a violation of orders. Just a little one. Cultural misunderstandings. The Proxima Centauri system turned out to be a textbook example of why you shouldn't trust interstellar ceasefires, negotiated by people who've never actually met the enemy in person. 3 Zephyrian heavy cruisers were currently orbiting the system's primary inhabited world, which I was pretty sure violated at least 17 different articles of whatever peace agreement the Concordat had supposedly negotiated. So much for rules. Sir, Wright reported, her voice tight. Sensors are detecting weapons charging sequences aboard the Zephyrian vessels. They're preparing to bombard the planetary surface any minute now. Well, I said, my voice calm, controlled. That certainly seems like aggressive behavior for ships that are supposed to be honoring a ceasefire. I suppose we should introduce ourselves and ask them about their intentions, politely. So, we're outnumbered 3 to 1, and those are heavy cruisers. Each one outguns us by a significant margin. A lot. Right, I said patiently, my voice soft. Dangerous. You're thinking like a Concordat military officer. You're assuming that because the enemy has larger ships and more firepower, they have some kind of tactical advantage. Right, don't they, sir? Only if you fight the kind of war they are expecting. Davies, open a channel to the leader vessel. Let's see if we can resolve this diplomatically, before we're forced to educate them about human military doctrine, the hard way. The alien captain who appeared on the main viewer was a classic example of Zephyrian military architecture, about 7 feet tall, covered in what looked like natural armor plating, and possessed of enough redundant vital organs that shooting him once would be considered more of a suggestion than a solution. He was also wearing the kind of expression that suggested he found human existence personally offensive, revolting. Human vessel, he growled, in accented standard galactic. You will withdraw immediately from this system. We have claimed it, in the name of the Zephyrian Empire. It is ours. I'm sorry, I said, with a kind of polite confusion. usually reserved for customer service interactions. But I think there might be some confusion here. According to my information, your government recently agreed to a ceasefire with the Galactic Concordat. Doesn't bombarding civilian populations violate the terms of that agreement? Just asking. The Zephyrian captain made a sound. That was probably laughter, but sounded more like a garbage disposal, trying to eat a motorcycle, grinding. The weak-minded fools of the Concordat agreed to surrender territory that was already ours, by right of conquest. This ceasefire merely formalizes what we have already taken. These humans are under our protection now. Our property. I said, my voice calm, controlled. I see the misunderstanding. You see, Captain Battle Leader Vorak of the 3rd Assault Fleet, right? Battle Leader Vorak. The thing is, those aren't just any humans down there. Those are Earth citizens, under the protection of the United Earth Defense Forces. And we have a somewhat different perspective on the whole protection concept than your people do. A very different one. Vorak's expression shifted to something that might have been amusement, if it hadn't been quite so terrifying. A cold, predatory glint. One small human ship against 3 battle cruisers. You amuse me, little primate. Perhaps I will make your death quick, as a reward for your courage. A quick end. That's very thoughtful of you, I said, my smile widening. But I think you might be operating under a slight tactical misconception. You see, you're not facing one small human ship. You're facing a human ship with a very specific set of design parameters, commanded by officers who've spent the better part of a decade learning how to kill things more efficiently than nature intended, better than anyone. I turned to write. Commander, please demonstrate the appropriate level of force for a situation where 3 hostile vessels are threatening Earth civilians. Make it count. Wright's smile was the kind that usually preceded engineering marvels, that violated several laws of physics, and at least one treaty governing the conduct of interstellar warfare. With pleasure, sir. All weapons, target the lead cruiser. Fire. Applied mathematics. Here's the thing about human military engineering that the rest of the galaxy never quite appreciated. We didn't build our weapons to look impressive. We built them to solve problems with extreme prejudice and mathematical precision. Cold, hard, math. The Defiant's primary armament consisted of 6 particle beam projectors, each one capable of delivering roughly the same amount of focused energy as a small star. When all 6 fired simultaneously, the result was less like a weapon and more like a localized violation of the laws of thermodynamics. Pure, raw energy. Battle Leader Vorak's flagship simply ceased to exist in any meaningful sense. One moment it was a 2-kilometer-long testament to Zephyrian military engineering, and the next, it was a rapidly expanding cloud of superheated plasma that lit up the system's inner planets, like a particularly violent sunrise. Silence. Profound. Who? I said, studying the tactical display with a kind of academic interest, usually reserved for particularly fascinating physics experiments that was more effective than our simulations predicted. Right. Make a note. To recalibrate our targeting systems, I think we might have been slightly conservative in our power estimates. Just a tad. Sir, Wright replied, her voice carrying the sort of professional satisfaction that came from watching theoretical mathematics become practical results. A beautiful thing. Sensors indicate that the remaining Zephyrian vessels are powering down their weapons and attempting to withdraw from the system. They are running. How rude, I said, my voice flat. Hey, we were just starting to get acquainted. Davies, open a channel to the remaining ships. Let's talk. The Zephyrian who appeared on the screen this time looked considerably less confident than his predecessor. In fact, He looked like someone who just witnessed something that violated several fundamental assumptions about the nature of reality. His world shattered. "Human vessel," he said, his voice carrying the sort of careful politeness usually reserved for conversations with heavily armed psychopaths. "We withdraw our claim on this system. There has been a misunderstanding, a terrible one." "Oh, I don't think there's been any misunderstanding at all," I replied cheerfully, my smile genuine. "You came here to bombard a planet full of civilians, and we came here to stop you. The mathematics worked out exactly as expected. Perfectly. But since you mention it, I'm curious about something. Didn't your government agree to a ceasefire with the Concordat?" We were not informed of any such agreement." He stammered. "Really? That seems like the sort of thing you'd want to communicate to your field commanders. Administrative oversight, perhaps. A big one." The alien's expression suggested that he was beginning to understand that this conversation wasn't going to end the way he'd originally hoped. His face tightened. "Perhaps," he said carefully. "There's been some confusion in our command structure. A mix-up." "Perhaps there has," I agreed, my voice soft. "Dangerous. Tell you what, Captain, why don't you return to your superiors and suggest that they clarify their position on this whole ceasefire situation? And while you're at it, you might want to mention that Earth forces are still active in this sector and taking a very personal interest in the welfare of human civilians. Always. And if we encounter other administrative oversights, then you'll discover that human military doctrine is quite generous when it comes to interpreting our defensive responsibilities. Very generous indeed. We have a saying, proportional response is for people who can't do math properly. Just saying." The Zephyrian ships withdrew with the kind of haste usually associated with natural disasters or tax audits. Within 20 minutes, they were beyond sensor range and presumably transmitting very urgent messages to whoever was supposed to be coordinating their empire's newfound commitment to peace and universal brotherhood. "Good luck with that, sir," Davies said, his voice bright. "We're receiving a priority transmission from the planetary government. They're asking if we need anything. Food, fuel, shore leave, naming rights to their firstborn children. The usual. Very grateful." "Gratitude is always nice," I said, my smile still in place. "But what we really need is information. Have them send up their intelligence files on recent Zephyrian fleet movements. If this was an administrative oversight, I want to know how many other oversights we might expect to encounter. How widespread. And if it wasn't an oversight," Wright asked, her eyes gleaming, "then we're about to become very popular with the Concordat leadership, right up until they realize that we've just turned their carefully negotiated ceasefire into the opening act of a much more interesting war. A whole new chapter. Administrative nightmares." The intelligence reports from Proxima Centauri made for fascinating reading. Assuming your definition of fascinating included phrases like systematic violation of interstellar law and imminent threat to galactic stability. It turned out that Vorak's battle group hadn't been an isolated case of poor communication. The Zephyrian Empire was conducting what they diplomatically termed security operations throughout at least 12 systems that was supposedly under Concordat protection. A full-scale invasion. "Sir," Wright said, her voice flat, reviewing the data, with the sort of expression usually associated with people discovering that their house was on fire and they forgot to turn off the stove. "It looks like the Zephyrians never had any intention of honoring the ceasefire. This whole thing was a delaying tactic while they repositioned their forces for a major offensive. A trap." "Shocking," I said, though I was beginning to suspect that the situation was even worse than it appeared. Far worse. I suppose the Concordat's intelligence services completely missed this development. According to these reports, Concordat forces have been systematically withdrawn from forward positions. As part of the peace dividend, most of their advanced warning systems have been deactivated, and their rapid response capabilities have been reassigned to ceremonial duties. Parades. Truly, I stayed at the tactical display, watching the little red icons that represented Zephyrian battle groups, moving through space like a particularly aggressive rash, spreading across the galaxy's arm. The Concordat had essentially disarmed themselves at the precise moment their enemies were preparing for the largest military operation in galactic history. Fools. Right, I said finally, my voice tight. In your professional opinion, how long do we have before the Zephyrians launch their main offensive? Based on their current fleet movements and logistical requirements, maybe 7 to 2 hours, so 3 days, tops. And how long will it take the Concordat to remobilize their forces? Once they realize what's happening, assuming they believe the intelligence reports, and don't spend 6 months forming committees to study the situation. 2 to 3 weeks minimum, likely more. So we're looking at a scenario where the Zephyrians achieve complete tactical surprise against an essentially defenseless enemy, occupy another 20 or 30 star systems, and present the galaxy with a fait accompli before anyone can mount an effective response. That appears to be the plan, sir. Their master plan. I leaned back in my command chair and considered our options. On one hand, we'd been officially dismissed from this conflict and ordered to return to Earth. On the other hand, we were career military officers who'd just discovered that several million civilians were about to become casualties in a war that everyone thought was over. A massacre. Davies, I said, my voice grim. Get me Admiral Harrison on a secure channel, and while you're at it, see if you can raise the other ships in our task force. I have a feeling we're about to redefine the concept of operational independence. Big time. Harrison's face appeared on the screen, looking like someone who'd spent the last several hours receiving exactly the sort of intelligence reports that made career military officers question their faith in the basic competence of civilian leadership. A common problem. O'Brien, he said without preamble, his voice weary. Please tell me you have some good news. Any good news? Well, so, we've successfully demonstrated that Zephyrian heavy cruisers are significantly less durable than their manufacturers advertise. Does that count? A little. Jesus Christ. Felix, what did you do? We encountered what appeared to be a minor administrative oversight and corrected it with appropriate force. The locals were very grateful, very happy. Harrison rubbed his temples with the sort of weary resignation that came from years of dealing with subordinates who had a talent for turning simple reconnaissance missions into interstellar incidents. A real gift. And I suppose this administrative oversight involved forces violating the ceasefire, too. Among other things, sir, it turns out that the ceasefire might not be quite as comprehensive as the Concordat leadership believes. We're looking at what appears to be systematic preparations for a major offensive operation, a full-scale war. I transmitted the intelligence data and watched Harrison's expression evolve from resignation to alarm to the sort of grim determination that usually preceded career-defining decisions, life-changing ones. How many ships do we have in the Outer Rim? He asked finally, his voice tight. The Defiant, the Retribution, the Indomitable, and the Righteous Fury. 4 ships total, with full combat loads and experienced crews. The best. Against how many Zephyrian battle groups? Current intelligence suggests somewhere between 15 and 20, sir. Roughly. So, We outnumbered roughly 60 to 1, assuming their intelligence estimates are accurate, and you're requesting permission to engage. "Sir," I said, my voice firm, "I'm requesting clarification of our mission parameters. If we're supposed to be conducting extended reconnaissance operations, then we need to be in position to observe and report on Zephyrian military activities. If those activities include aggressive action against Concordat civilians, then our defensive responsibilities seem fairly clear, don't they?" Harrison stared at me for a long moment, and I could practically see him calculating the political ramifications of what I was suggesting. On one hand, we'd been explicitly dismissed from this conflict. On the other hand, we were about to watch the largest military disaster in galactic history unfold while we had the power to prevent it. A tough choice. "Felix," he said finally, his voice low, grave, "I'm going to give you the most dangerous order I've ever issued. You are authorized to use your best judgment in protecting Concordat civilians from hostile action. Your operational parameters are limited only by your ammunition supply and your crew's endurance. Understood?" "Understood, sir." "And if the Concordat leadership objects to our continued involvement?" Harrison's smile was the sort that usually preceded the kind of historical footnotes that began with phrases like "against all odds" and ended with massive casualties on both sides. "Then they can file a formal complaint after we finished saving their asses." Against all odds. The thing about being outnumbered 60 to 1 is that traditional military tactics become somewhat irrelevant, completely useless. You can't establish a defensive line when the enemy has enough ships to surround you 12 different ways. You can't conduct a fighting withdrawal when there's nowhere to withdraw to. And you definitely can't win a stand-up battle when the other side can afford to lose 50 ships for every one of yours and still come out ahead. Fortunately, humans had never been particularly interested in traditional military tactics. We preferred creative solutions. "All right, people," I announced to the combined crews of our little task force via encrypted communications, "let's review our tactical situation. We outnumbered, outgunned, and operating without official support in a hostile region of space. The enemy has superior numbers, better logistics, and home field advantage. So what?" "So," came Wright's voice over the channel, "you're supposed to be giving us a motivational speech. This sounds more like a suicide note." "Just saying. I'm getting to the good part," I replied, my voice calm. "The Zephyrians are expecting to fight a conventional war against conventional opponents, using conventional tactics. They are planning to mass their forces, overwhelm fixed defenses, and occupy territory through superior firepower and numerical advantage. Textbook stuff. And that's good because we're not conventional opponents, and we're not going to fight a conventional war. We're going to remind the galaxy why human military doctrine is based on the principle that if you're not cheating, you're not trying hard enough. Simple as that." The plan, such as it was, relied on several fundamental advantages that human forces enjoyed over their alien counterparts. First, we were faster. Human ships were built for speed and maneuverability, rather than impressive appearances or defensive capability. Second, we were more aggressive. While other species viewed warfare as a series of carefully planned engagements, humans treated it as organized violence, with a tactical component, a dark art. Third, and most importantly, we were completely unpredictable. The Zephyrians were expecting their enemies to form battle lines, establish defensive positions, and conduct orderly retreats when overwhelmed. They were not expecting their enemies to split into individual units, attack from 17 different directions simultaneously, and treat the laws of physics as suggestions, rather than absolute requirements. Rules? What rules? Right, I said, my voice sharp. Take the retribution and the indomitable, and hit their supply lines. I want their logistics network disrupted, their communication relays destroyed, and their command structure wondering what the hell just happened to them. Make them question everything. So, that's going to require attacking targets deep behind enemy lines. Exactly. The Zephyrians have committed most of their forces to their main offensive. Their re-areas are probably defended by whatever they consider second-line units. Show them why that was a tactical error, a grave mistake. And what will you and the Fury be doing? We're going to attack their main battle group directly and see how they react when someone shoots back. Hard. There was a moment of silence on the communications channel. So, said Commander Reynolds from the Righteous Fury. Just to be clear, you're planning to attack their main force. With two ships. Two ships. That's it. Reynolds, my boy, I said patiently, my voice calm. You're thinking like someone who believes in fair fights. We're not trying to destroy their entire fleet in a single engagement. We're trying to inflict maximum casualties in minimum time, then move to the next target before they can figure out what hit them. And if they manage to coordinate their response, then we'll remind them why human ships are built for speed rather than impressive appearances, and why that speed matters. Applied psychology. The Zephyrian main battle group was an impressive sight. I'll give them that. 43 heavy warships, arranged in a classic conquest formation, moving through space, with the kind of inexorable certainty that came from believing you were the biggest predator in the galaxy. Their formation was textbook perfect. Their coordination was flawless, and their tactical doctrine was probably studied in military academies across a dozen star systems. It was also completely useless against opponents who didn't read the same textbooks, who threw the textbooks out the window. Davies, I said, studying the tactical display with the sort of professional appreciation usually reserved for particularly elegant mathematical proofs. What's the maximum effective range on their primary weapons? Approximately 40,000 kilometers, so standard particle beam projectors, with focusing arrays optimized for ship-to-ship combat. And our maximum effective range, 120,000 kilometers with a new targeting system. So, a huge difference. Outstanding. Reynolds, are you seeing this? I see it, Commander. They've arranged themselves in a perfect target formation. It's almost artistic, like they're posing. Artistic is right. They're so busy looking impressive that they've forgotten the first rule of space combat. The side that shoots first usually wins. Let's give them a practical demonstration of human gunnery, the hard way. The opening salvo from the Defiant and the Righteous Fury caught the Zephyrian formation completely off guard. 6 ships simply vanished in brilliant flashes of light. Their hulls turned to superheated plasma before their crews had time to realize they were under attack. The remaining ships immediately began evasive maneuvers, but they were trying to dodge weapons that moved at nearly the speed of light, while flying in formation, designed for impressive parades, rather than tactical flexibility. Fools, sir, Reynolds reported, his voice tight. Enemy formation is breaking up. They are attempting to close range and engage us directly. Let them come, I said, my voice calm. Davies, plot a course that keeps us at maximum weapons range. We're not trying to win a decisive battle here. We're trying to make them chase us, while Wright hits their supply lines. Hard. Sir, they are launching fighters. Many of them. How many? Roughly 300, sir. A lot. I paused for a moment, considering this development. Fightercraft were one of those tactical innovations that looked impressive on paper, but had some significant limitations in practice. They were fast, maneuverable, and capable of overwhelming larger ships. Through sheer numbers, they were also completely unarmored, lightly armed, and dependent on their carriers for fuel, ammunition, and life support. Disposable. Reynolds, I said, remember those new point defense systems we've been field testing? The ones that intelligence said were probably overkill for any realistic combat scenario. Too much power. Those would be the ones. Let's see how they perform against a target-rich environment. Have some fun. The Zephyrian fighters came in fast and hard, probably expecting to overwhelm our defensive systems. Through numerical superiority, it was a sound tactical theory that might even have worked against conventional opponents. Unfortunately for them, human point defense systems were designed by a species that had spent considerable time thinking about the most efficient ways to shoot down large numbers of small, fast-moving targets. The result was less like a space battle and more like someone had decided to demonstrate the principles of industrial automation. Using military hardware, a processing plant, automated tracking systems identified targets, calculated intercept courses, and fired with mechanical precision. The fighters didn't so much get shot down as processed, turned into scrap metal by systems that treated incoming missiles and enemy fighters as essentially the same type of problem, requiring the same solution. Quick, efficient, brutal, Sir Davies reported, his voice almost giddy. Enemy fighter strength is down to approximately 30% and decreasing rapidly. They are running. Outstanding. And their main battle group, still pursuing, but they're having trouble maintaining formation at these speeds. Several ships have fallen behind, and their targeting systems don't appear to be optimized for long-range engagement. They are slow and clumsy. Perfect. Keep us at maximum range and maintain fire. Let's see how long they are willing to chase us, while taking casualties, heavy ones. The answer, it turned out, was not very long. After losing 18 ships to weapons they couldn't effectively retain fire against, while watching their fighter screen get systematically dismantled by point defense systems that treated military aircraft like particularly aggressive insects, the Zephyrian commander apparently decided that this wasn't the sort of easy victory he'd been promised. Not at all. Sir, enemy forces are withdrawing, Davies announced, his voice clear. All of them. Yes, sir. They are returning to their original formation and moving back toward their home territory. In a hurry, I stayed at the tactical display, watching the red icons, representing enemy ships, retreat with the kind of haste usually associated with natural disasters or tax audits. Right. I called over the communication system. Right. How are you making out with their supply lines? Spectacularly, sir. We've destroyed 4 logistics bases, knocked out their primary communication relay, and convinced 3 supply convoys that they'd rather be somewhere else. Anyway else. Their re-areas are in complete chaos. A beautiful mess. Any casualties on our side? Minor damage to the Indomitable's port shields, sir. And Reynolds reports that the Fury is down to about 60% ammunition. Other than that, we're fully operational. Ready for more. Outstanding. Davies, open a channel to the Zephyrian command ship. I think it's time we had a diplomatic conversation about the nature of administrative oversights. Again, terms of surrender. The Zephyrian admiral who appeared on the main viewer looked like someone who'd just been forced to explain to his superiors why his carefully planned military operation had turned into what military historians would probably classify as an unmitigated disaster. His armor was damaged, his expression was grim, and his body language suggested that he was having the sort of career-ending day that usually resulted in early retirement or traditional warrior suicides. A very bad day. Human commander, he said, his voice carrying the sort of careful respect usually reserved for conversations with natural disasters or heavily armed psychopaths. I am War Leader Kathak of the Imperial 7th Fleet. We underestimated your capabilities. War Leader, I replied, with the kind of polite professionalism that came from being raised to respect one's elders, even when those elders had just spent several hours trying to kill you. I'm Commander O'Brien of the United Earth Defense Forces, and I think there might be some confusion about our current tactical situation. Perhaps confusion. Kathak's expression suggested that he had a fairly clear understanding of exactly how badly things had gone wrong. His face twitched. Well, yes. You see, according to my information, your government recently agreed to a ceasefire with the Galactic Concordat. Yet, here you are, conducting military operations in systems that are supposedly under Concordat protection. I'm starting to wonder if there might be some communication issues in your command structure. Big ones. Kathak was quiet for a long moment, and I could practically see him weighing his options. He could continue the deception and pretend this was all a misunderstanding, or he could acknowledge the reality that his carefully planned surprise offensive had just run headfirst into the sort of opposition that military planners usually classified as acts of God or something wise. Commander O'Brien, he said finally, his voice resigned. Perhaps we should discuss terms. Now, terms? I asked, raising an eyebrow with the sort of polite surprise usually reserved for unexpected dinner invitations. Admiral, I'm not sure what terms you think are available. Your forces have violated a ceasefire agreement for the second time in less than a week, attempted to bombard civilian populations, and engaged Earth Defense Forces in hostile action. Again, in most jurisdictions, that's called acts of war. What do you want from us? Really? That was, I had to admit, an excellent question. What did I want from them? Officially, I wanted them to honor their ceasefire agreement and withdraw from Concordat territory. Unofficially, I wanted to make sure this particular lesson, in tactical reality, made its way to every military planner in the Zephyrian Empire. Very clearly, what I want, I said, my voice calm, measured, is actually quite reasonable. I want you to return to your home territory and inform your government that their ceasefire agreement with the Concordat is still in effect and will remain in effect until officially terminated through proper diplomatic channels. I want you to explain to them that Earth Defense Forces will continue to operate in this sector under our humanitarian protection mandate, and I want you to make absolutely certain they understand that any future administrative oversights will be met with appropriate defensive measures. Very appropriate. You understand. And what assurance do we have that you won't attack our forces if we withdraw? Admiral, I said, my voice firm, we're not interested in conquering your territory or occupying your worlds. We're interested in protecting civilian populations from aggressive military action. If your forces aren't conducting aggressive military actions, then we have no reason to shoot at them. None. What about compensation for our losses? I stared at him for a moment, trying to process the sheer audacity required to ask for compensation after conducting unprovoked attacks on civilian populations. Admiral, I said finally, my voice like ice, let me explain something about human military doctrine. When someone attacks civilian populations under our protection, we don't pay them compensation for the privilege of stopping them. We consider it a public service for the good of the galaxy. Then what incentive do we have to accept your terms? Well, I said, my voice softening slightly, you could consider the alternative You've lost approximately 30 ships in 2 separate engagements, with a force that consists of 4 vessels. Your tactical doctrine has been proven inadequate. Your technological advantages have been neutralized, and your numerical superiority has been rendered irrelevant. If you don't accept these terms, you'll discover that what we've done to you so far was actually us being polite, just a friendly warning. Morvac was quiet for a long moment, probably calculating the odds of successfully continuing his offensive against opponents who had just redefined his understanding of tactical mathematics and reality itself. And if our government refuses to honor the ceasefire agreement, then your government will discover that Earth Defense Forces have very strong opinions about the proper conduct of interstellar relations. And unlike the Concordat Council, we don't require committee approval to express those opinions with overwhelming force. We just act. The Zephyrian fleet withdrawal was by all accounts one of the most orderly tactical retreats in galactic history. Every ship that could still maintain propulsion departed the theater with the sort of haste usually associated with natural disasters or tax investigations. Within 18 hours, they were beyond sensor range and presumably transmitting very urgent messages to their home government about the need to reconsider their recent strategic decisions. Urgently, Sir, Davies reported, his voice bright. We're receiving priority transmissions from 17 different Concordat member governments. They are all expressing gratitude for our protection of their civilian populations and requesting continued Earth Defense Force presence in their territories. Any word from Concordat High Command? Nothing official, sir, though we have received several informal communications that could be interpreted as cautiously optimistic about our continued operations. A good sign. And the Special Committee on Irregular Military Operations still meeting, sir. Current estimates suggest they'll have preliminary recommendations ready in about 6 weeks, maybe 8. Bureaucracy moves slow. I leaned back in my command chair and considered our tactical situation. We'd successfully prevented 2 major Zephyrian offensives, demonstrated the superiority of human military doctrine, and provided the galaxy with a practical lesson in why dismissing competent military forces during an active conflict might not be the smartest decision ever made. A very, very bad idea. More importantly, we'd reminded everyone involved that sometimes the best way to ensure peace was to make war sufficiently expensive that nobody wanted to pay for it at all. Right, I said. What's our current operational status? 4 ships, full combat capability, operating independently, with the gratitude of half the galaxy and the nervous respect of the other half. We've also received unofficial supply and logistics support from colonial governments throughout the sector, and our ammunition situation adequate for continued operations, assuming we don't run into anything larger than a major fleet engagement. We're good to go. Outstanding. Davies, prepare a message to Admiral Harrison. Tell him that our extended reconnaissance mission has identified and neutralized significant threats to civilian populations, and that we're continuing patrol operations to ensure regional stability. And if Concordat High Command objects to our continued presence, then they can explain to their constituent governments why they're more concerned about bureaucratic protocol than civilian protection. I suspect that conversation won't go the way they expect. Not at all. Epilogue. Mission accomplished. 6 months later, the Galactic Concordat officially requested the reinstatement of human military contracts with significantly improved terms and considerably more operational independence than our previous agreements. The Special Committee on Irregular Military Operations issued a report concluding that Earth Defense Forces had acted with exemplary professionalism in protecting civilian populations during a period of administrative uncertainty. High praise. The Zephyrian Empire, meanwhile, had undergone what the historians would diplomatically term a strategic reevaluation of territorial expansion policies. Their new foreign minister was a remarkably reasonable individual who seemed genuinely interested in negotiating lasting peace agreements that didn't require immediate military enforcement. A welcome change. As for the UES Defiant and her sister ships, we continued our extended patrol operations with a sort of quiet satisfaction that came from a job well done. We'd reminded the galaxy that dismissing competent military forces during an active conflict was generally a bad idea, that peace agreements were only as good as the people willing to enforce them, and that sometimes the most effective diplomacy was conducted with overwhelming firepower and a willingness to use it when necessary. "Sir," Wright said, her voice calm, reviewing our latest intelligence reports. "Sensors are detecting some unusual activity in the Vega sector. Looks like pirates have been hitting merchant convoys near the trade routes. A nuisance." "Pirates?" I asked, settling into my command chair with the sort of anticipation usually reserved for people who just discovered new opportunities for professional development. "How many ships are we talking about?" "Intelligence estimates suggest at least a dozen raider vessels, possibly more. They've been targeting civilian cargo haulers and passenger transports." "Easy pickings." "Well," I said, my voice firm, "I suppose we should investigate. After all, protecting civilian shipping falls under our humanitarian protection mandate. It's our duty." "Sir, the pirates are probably using light raiders and converted merchant vessels. They won't be expecting to face military opposition. Just easy prey." "Right," I said. "That sounds like their problem, not ours. Davies, set course for the Vega sector. Let's go explain to some pirates why attacking civilian vessels in our operational area might not have been their best career decision ever." The UES Defiant turned toward the Vega sector with the sort of purposeful determination that had become humanity's signature contribution to galactic peace and stability. Behind us, the galaxy continued its long, slow process of learning that some problems were best solved by people who understood the therapeutic value of applied violence and weren't afraid to provide it in generous doses. And somewhere in the depths of space, a new group of people was about to discover why human military doctrine was based on the principle that if you were going to do something, you might as well do it properly. The war, as it turned out, wasn't over after all. It was just getting started.